This is a topic of some of your reporting this week that people, by and large, heading into the November election, thought a lot more of the checks and balances than Charlie Sykes and I do.
Yeah. So during the election, I would talk to people and I would say, what do you think of the central claim by Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans that if Trump is reelected, he's going to rule like an autocrat? And time again, people would say to me, they would say, well, there will be checks and balances. There's the three branches. And to me, that was particularly interesting because it showed that what we're taught in elementary school had persisted in the minds of many Americans, and that they had extreme faith in that they thought that the thing standing between Trump and being an autocrat was the three branches, the separation of powers.
What did they think that mean? Had they not read anything about the Supreme Court giving him absolute immunity or the House Republicans rolling over?
I think it showed, look, this is something that Schoolhouse Rock, spent a lot of time on back in the 70s. They did
Maybe they should go back.
Videos of it. And, it is something, there's a lot of reverence in this country for the Constitution. And the central part of the Constitution is the separation of powers. So when I went and you kind of look at what the three branches are today, you're not taking many leaps to say that they're in a weaker position to hold Trump accountable than they certainly were in 2017.
Sure.
In 2017, the court had a more even split. You had, in the executive branch, you had Jim Comey as your FBI director, and you had political appointees under Trump who were willing to recuse themselves from the Russia investigation in Jeff Sessions and appoint a special counsel in Rod Rosenstein, and in Rod Rosenstein, someone that allowed the Michael Cohen investigation to go forward. So that was from the executive branch. And then in Congress, you still had some anti-Trump Republicans. And I think it would be fair to say that the Republican Party today has been really remade in Trump's image. So the three branches, this thing that people put an enormous amount of faith of, is in a weaker position today to do those things that children in school are taught about.
Well, I mean, I think we'll have to send them a note in a month if all these guys get through, because the textbook obligation of the checks and balances is to do what's in the Constitution, absent the money of the richest man in the world, absent the extraordinary pressure cooker of Fox News and all the other sort of knockoff Fox Newses on the right. I mean, so to the degree that this is about a perversion of something people hold dear and believe to be true, that project seems near complete.
Well, it's interesting because the framers saw this coming in many ways. I'm always seem to be bringing up the Federalist Papers on the show. So I'll go to glasses again. So to your point about the Constitution, we're a young country with a fairly durable Constitution that people do believe in. And Madison said, the Senate was to guard against the fickleness and passion of the House. And I think it was Washington that said that the Senate was supposed to be the saucer that the hot tea of the House would flow over into. So there is a tremendous amount of reverence that's expected of our Senate. But, to your point and to Charlie's point, we have accepted to some extent the influence of the wealthy and business leaders in our governance. We've accepted some of that. But what's concerning now is that what you're seeing with Elon Musk is the darkest of the dark money. There is no accountability there. We don't know where exactly he's spending his money. When you're looking at Twitter, for example, if you are casually observing government and politics, you're looking at Twitter, you don't know what's him versus what's happening organically. With the algorithm, when you're looking at, feeds, is the algorithm rhythming to Elon Musk and Donald Trump's sort of interests, right? And because that line has been blurred, that has also blurred the distinctions and that checks and balances that we talk about. And so when you use terms like oligarchy, and you can also layer on top of that this extreme privatization, because that's what it feels like, does NASA become Elon Musk at the end of the day, because that's what he wants. He wants to be able to take control of these parts of government, not just reform it. And that's really the scary part that hopefully the senators will get to the bottom of.
I mean, Mike, the reporting suggests that there might be a tension if Trump obliterates or shoves through the wood chipper even the perception that he cares about this cherished idea of checks and balances. Do you sense that there's any political risk to doing away with it?
I don't think, I mean, look, the American people elected Donald Trump knowing all of this stuff. Like, there's no real secrets about how Donald Trump wants to operate and is operating. I don't even think
So where do you think their faith that he won't be so bad because of the checks and balances comes from?
I mean, the funny thing about that is that that's things that people that didn't vote for Donald Trump would say, that they thought that the system would hold. And, you know, some of that is maybe the belief that the system held the first time that Trump was president. You know, but there is this thing, you know, that we're taught back when we're children about the Constitution, the reverence for the Constitution. That, you know, the country has had presidents of different parties hand off power to each other, you know, time and time again. The one time that we had, or most recent time, or dramatic time in history when we had a President Nixon who there were questions about whether he broke the law and abused his power. The Justice Department investigated him. The Supreme Court forced him to hand stuff over, and Congress was ready to impeach him. That is largely a vision of the system working to check a potentially unbound president. I'm not sure that the system is set up today to do that.
Well, that's a point that we consider all the time. If you think that the system is broken, maybe the way of looking at it is that it's actually working, but not for the people you think it should be working for, right? That for a very small segment of the population.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sets up a longer conversation about what, I mean, anti-Trump sentiments have always been branded better by the Trump side than the Trump opposition. And I think if they're coming out against the Constitution, it's enormous political flank to open up. And I guess I'd ask all of you to think about what that means, to leap into the terrain of being against the Constitution, which is where they're heading.